This was the exact place where the leader of Hezbollah was killed, and I'm going to tell you how it all happened. And even though there are still brands in the middle of downtown, even Rolex stores are still open. Now I came to the suburbs here in Lebanon and look at this mess behind me. One of the largest non-nuclear explosions in the modern history of the world happened here. From the heart of downtown in Lebanon, welcome to a new video. We're going to be exploring a bit of this country's history. How did it become what it is today? And I, who honestly haven't stopped being amazed in the last 2 days I've been exploring, with the amount of luxury, authenticity, and beautiful little towns I've seen. But at the same time, understanding a bit about the painful and complicated history of wars and conflicts this country has gone through. So, as we go through different places in this city, the capital of Lebanon, we're going to learn a little about how they became what they are today. This is one of the few buildings left from the Civil War that hasn't been renovated. Between 75 and 90, there were 15 years of non-stop war here in Lebanon. Look at all the bullet holes in the walls. First, you have to understand a bit of the history of this country where different civilizations have passed through over the years. The Greeks, the Romans, the Phoenicians, the Persians. In other words, countless civilizations passed through here to make it what it is today. Then they were part of the Ottoman Empire until the end of World War I when they came under French mandate, and it wasn't until 1943 that they achieved their independence. I already mentioned in the previous video that the powers within the government were divided a bit among the religions. That is, the president has to be a Maronite Christian, then the prime minister has to be a Shiite, and then the speaker of parliament has to be a Sunni. And so, let's say they thought it would be a good way for everyone to have a voice and a vote within the government, but tensions always existed. They never fully agreed, even if we look at things today. Did you watch the previous video? They went 3 years without a president because they couldn't agree on choosing one. Remember that in countries that have a parliament, it's the parliament that chooses the president and people vote for the political parties in parliament. But anyway, let's not get too far ahead. This is parliament right here. This is where the decision is made about who will be the president of Lebanon. After its independence, Lebanon experienced a period of almost total prosperity. Between the 1950s and 1960s, it was known as the Paris of the Middle East. However, in 1948, when Israel was established as a state, many Palestinians had to flee to Lebanon. And within that Palestinian community, the well-known PLO was being formed, which is the Palestine Liberation Organization. In 1964, this organization was finally consolidated. And so, the political division within Lebanon increased and internal tensions began to arise that would destabilize the country. Right now, I'm at the Place de l'Étoile. That's what this place is called because, well, all its little streets used to be cafes and luxury shops in the past. I mean, one of the biggest tourist spots in Beirut. But in 75, a civil war began that lasted 15 years within Lebanon. And mainly, it was between the Christian militias and Palestinian factions, obviously supported by the Lebanese militias. So it was a mess. More than 25 different militias participated, and there was, well, influence from Israel and influence from Syria. Or at least that's what you read in history. But we're all pretty sure here that it wasn't just those two countries that got involved, but others as well. Which I'd rather not mention in this video because I don't know if by mentioning it so much. In the Iraq series, some of my videos got banned, so you can probably imagine what happened. And in those 15 years, this place, among many others, was left completely destroyed. 150,100 people lost their lives in this civil war that lasted almost 2 decades here in Lebanon. And I think that was the worst moment in history, but not the only one. there were still things to come, maybe even worse, I don't know, maybe even worse. Here you can see one of the most luxurious hotels of the time, which was a 5-star hotel, the Holiday Inn and the Phoenicia. Over there, all those are, look, remains of grenades, of mortars that, well, were used during the Civil War. These atrocities. And the craziest thing of all is that right in front of the hotel, which is still bombed out, we found ultra-luxury properties. Look at this beautiful building over here, hotels. But Lebanon's nightmare wasn't over yet. And during this civil war, there were some important moments that are worth mentioning. In 1982, Israel invaded southern Lebanon. Then, in 1986, Syria also occupied a large part of the territory with a military presence. And by 1989, they signed the Taif Agreement, which was like the peace agreement marking the end of the civil war. And even though the war was over, Syria still maintained a military presence inside Lebanon from 1990 until 2005, when a car bomb killed former Prime Minister Rafik Hariri. And well, that raised tension so much that it led to what was called the Cedar Revolution. Remember that Lebanon has a cedar tree on its flag. In fact, it's the only country in the world with a tree on its flag, and it's a cedar. So in 2006, after this Cedar Revolution, all the Syrian troops ended up leaving and returned to their country. And you might think, okay, things are starting to stabilize, but no, that wasn't the case, because in July 2006, a group of Shia soldiers known as Hezbollah, and let's call them a group of soldiers because there are, let's say, different perceptions about this group. I've already talked to several people here in Lebanon, and everyone has a very different opinion. So I'm going to invite you to do a little research and form your own opinions, draw your own conclusions, and decide for yourselves. What role does this group called Hezbollah play? The fact is that they kidnapped some Israeli soldiers. And that's how the well-known 34-day war with Israel began, in which this group managed to liberate this part of the south that had been taken by Israel. They won the war, in quotes, and I say in quotes because I feel that no war is truly won. The only thing that happens is that lives are lost. But they became firmly established as a military and resistance group, and they occupied part of Lebanon, and Israel withdrew a bit. Here we have St. George Orthodox Church. Over there we have a mosque. And here we have another church. This one not Orthodox. Right next to the mosque. And all this that we see here are archaeological remains of the Roman Empire that were found. And well, they left them there so that people could walk by and see them. A bit of the history of all the civilizations that have come to this country. And then, even though some political reforms were made, the same confessional power-sharing arrangement was maintained. Where, you know, the president has to be Maronite, the prime minister Shiite, and then in parliament Sunni, a little bit of everything. That created a certain peace, but only in name, because in 2017, new protests started, which lasted more than 2 years, until 2019, when a social protest broke out. Because they raised taxes on WhatsApp calls, which was actually preceded by an economic reform. But this little detail was what triggered the protest, that they raised the tax on WhatsApp calls. Can you imagine that? And these protests were carried out against the entire political class. People, the public, were already tired of so much internal division, especially at the political level, because you walk down the streets. And honestly, yesterday, well, we were visiting towns that are mostly Muslim, other towns that are mostly Christian, and everyone is super friendly. We even saw places where, well, women were showing their shoulders because they're supposed to be Christian, and then others who were quite covered with the niqab who are Muslim. And nothing happens. I mean, everyone lives together peacefully in that place. So, people were really tired of the government, and the slogan was, all of them means all of them, meaning the whole political class has us fed up. Please, please, the Prime Minister should resign, and that's what happened. The Prime Minister resigned, but things didn't seem to get better because of that. This is Independence Martyrs Square, but I don't know if you can see how many bullet holes all the statues have. After this country became independent and a tribute was paid to the martyrs, there have been quite a few more conflicts since then, right? So they've used it as a shooting range. It's impressive how many sightseeing buses there are, the kind where you go and they take you to different places of interest in the city. Right now there are two, but I saw more when we were arriving. And that shows that despite everything, tourism is an alternative for the rest of the Middle Eastern countries. In fact, when I was in Kuwait a couple of years ago, I met a Kuwaiti there. Sharia law is applied in its most extreme form, meaning that alcohol is completely forbidden. You can't dance, and of course, there are no nightclubs. And this gentleman told me that during all his vacations, he would come to Lebanon to party and have fun. Because here, well, people are more open-minded in that sense, and they give individuals the right to choose what they want to do. If you want to be a religious extremist or conservative, you can be, but if you want to be a bit more flexible and still love your religion. But at the same time, if you want to go out partying, have a drink, it's no big deal. You're not hurting anyone at all. You can do that too. That's why people from Saudi Arabia, Kuwait, Oman, Qatar, and other countries, even from the United Arab Emirates, come here to Lebanon to have a good time. Qatar and other countries, even the United Arab Emirates, come here to Lebanon to enjoy themselves. This country, after a recent event, was kind of banned. These countries told their citizens they couldn't go to Lebanon, but I'll tell you more about that a little later. And even though in the middle of downtown, brands like Rolex are still open, look at this. Most of the luxury stores have closed in this place. It's true that there are branches open in other parts of Beirut, but this place is still pretty hard hit. And, well, it seems to have some signs of improvement, at least an intention to rebuild and repair, but honestly, in my opinion, they still need some more time. Look at what I was telling you, a Christian woman and a Muslim woman side by side without any problem at all. Look, over there is Brekwas or Brecken. I'm not sure how it's pronounced. It's open too. But there are also closed shops though. A bit of everything. We went to a supermarket and checked meat prices. That's in dollars, $46 per kilo for Australian ribeye, $40 for USDA ribeye. $90 per kilo of meat, $65 even up to $100 for a kilo of meat here in Lebanon. That's in supermarkets, not restaurants. Restaurants cost more, but look how beautiful this place is. It's a supermarket right in the middle of downtown. Look at some other crazy prices. A kilo of lemons is 1,800,000 pounds. Lebanese pounds, which would be a little over $20. Just for reference, $1 is 90,000 Lebanese pounds and a kilo of lemons is $20. Imagine if you want to make ceviche, you need, I don't know, 2 or 3 kilos of lemons to get the juice, right? Look, a coconut is 350,000 To make the math easy, we can just divide it by 10 and that's it, exactly 3.5 or $4. That's crazy. Look, we could export mangoes from Venezuela to Lebanon and become millionaires. $45 or $50 per kilo for this little mango. Also, look at the size of this little mango. It's tiny. Here I found some other mangoes a bit bigger. These are good, like the ones we know. Actually, it seems more like a manga, but anyway, it's called a mango. And it costs $2,300,000, which would be about $25 or $27 per kilo of mango. It's interesting that in the same supermarket where we saw prices in Lebanese pounds, we also see prices in dollars. I imagine it's because all these products are imported while, well, the vegetables are a mix between local and imported. So, to keep a standardized price and not have to keep changing it all the time because the Lebanese currency isn't very stable either. Look how interesting. In the downtown streets, you can find a bit of this country's history. Here it tells you about the civilizations that have passed through here, and also some illustrative photos of some of the most important moments in its history. That preparation looked great. It even made me want a sandwich, but I won't do it. Just a falafel, since it's a lot of fried food. Let's see how it is. Completely vegetarian. For those who don't eat meat and come to this part of the world, you can have falafel, which is spectacular. Made with wheat and chickpeas. I went all the way to the port of Beirut to keep telling you the story of this country. But some soldiers told me I couldn't film. In fact, they kind of gave me a little permit. They told me, okay, quick, take photos, don't shoot videos. Obviously, I shot videos, didn't take photos, but I couldn't talk to the camera, so it wouldn't be so obvious. So I went back to downtown. And the port of Beirut plays a very important role among the historical catastrophes that have happened in this country. Because on August 4, 2020, one of the largest non-nuclear explosions in the entire modern history of the world happened. It's not just one of the worst things to happen in this country, it's one of the worst in the world. The port has a very important role in the history of Beirut, and he told me he was a videographer too. Okay, let's go. The kindness of the people in the Middle East is unmatched. I'm not exaggerating, it's a revolution. And he told me that he was also a good videographer, that if I gave him the camera, he would record me for free. I mean, he would literally stand up, come with me and everything. And I, well, obviously told him no, but I really appreciate it. I truly appreciate it from the bottom of my heart. So, to understand why this explosion happened at the port, we have to go back to 2013 when a ship was seized at the port of Beirut because it arrived damaged. They said they had a mechanical failure, that they had to make a safety stop, and when the Beirut authorities inspected the ship, they realized it was not fit to sail and was carrying 2,750 tons of ammonium nitrate. And the thing is, no one imagined that this ship was carrying a ticking time bomb that would explode 7 years later, destroying half of Beirut and leaving wounds that still haven't healed today. No. Emmanuel, but tell me the story as it is. Whose ship was it? Why did it come to Lebanon? Who was responsible for the explosion? Tell me everything. Here goes. The MB Rosas was a cargo ship flying the Moldovan flag that left from Georgia heading to Mozambique, specifically to an explosives company. It made a stop in Beirut. As I mentioned, the goods were seized and stored in Hangar 12. It is said that the official owner of the ship was Igor Greshchonskin, a Russian businessman based in Cyprus. However, leaked documents suggest that the real owner may have been Charalambos Manoli, a Cypriot tycoon with offshore companies in the Marshall Islands. In short, this Igor was his frontman, and the craziest thing of all is that the intermediary company called Zavarolanted has been making payments to the Bashar al-Assad regime, supporting Syria in several transactions. So this is where things get a bit mysterious, and not like the official news says that it was simply government negligence and it exploded because of that negligence. And I would already think that there's something rigged going on back there. If you're wondering, ammonium nitrate is a highly explosive chemical that is mainly used as an agricultural fertilizer. But it's also used to make explosives for mining and to make homemade bombs. Illegally, and after 7 years of improper storage, a massive explosion occurred at the port of Beirut. According to FBI investigations, only 552 tons of ammonium nitrate exploded, which is just 1/5 of the 2,750 tons that were seized. And what happened to the rest of the ammonium nitrate? Nobody knows. Nobody ever knew. It was horrible. Do you remember that song? Let's see if I'm showing my age. But well, the truth is that nobody knows if it was sold, if it was diverted, or if it was stolen. But what is known is that there were 200 dead, more than 7,000 injured, and more than 300,000 people were left homeless. Everything blew up. Literally, everything around was blown away. They say the explosion was felt even in Cyprus, which is 250 kilometers from Beirut. It doesn't make sense. The estimated losses were $15 billion. Do you know how much money that is? I can't even imagine it. I mean, no, there's no way to picture that amount of money. But the truth is that even today you can still see scars from this serious catastrophe that happened in the country. And in case you paid attention, this explosion happened in 2020, the same year a global pandemic also occurred. Therefore, all of that combined and a new wave of protests against the government started again. They were extremely tired. Hassan Diaz's government had to resign, although many of those politicians are still in power. To this day, absolutely no one has been arrested and absolutely no one has been found guilty for what happened at the port. The judge has had to be changed several times due to political interests. And what doesn't make the news, what you can't find on the internet. What some Lebanese people I've had the chance to talk to tell me is that on that morning they heard some airplanes. And you know that Israel has been in constant conflict with Hezbollah, this armed group that I've already been telling you about throughout this video. So one assumption is that it was, well, an airstrike by Israel and everything blew up. Although this is not confirmed, it's just an assumption. We need to keep investigating. We have to wait for the final result of the investigation. One, to find out what caused that storage to explode after 7 years, especially on that specific day. And here you can see the St. George Tourist Complex. As you can see, there are many swimming pools. In the background, you can also see Zaytuna Bay, one of the most luxurious areas in Lebanon with countless yachts. But inside this complex, there's also a practically abandoned hotel that hasn't been renovated and has a somewhat dark history behind it. I'm going to tell you about it soon. I don't know if you can see that sign over there that says, "Stop Solidaire." The thing is, Rafik Hariri, the former minister who was killed in the car bomb I mentioned to you after the civil war when he came to power, proposed a project of basically all the businessmen, all the merchants in downtown had to join a large company that he had set up to manage the whole place. So, depending on your business, your hotel, your building, you would have a share in this company that he set up. All of this was to rebuild Lebanon. Wow, look, a Ferrari. Wow, wow. I'm telling you, the amount of luxury in Lebanon doesn't make sense. But anyway, after he set up this company and started rebuilding Lebanon, everything sounds really nice. Up until that moment, there were companies like this St. George complex that simply didn't want to be part of his big company. He wanted to run his business on his own. And they boycotted him, they didn't give him the licenses, they didn't give him remodeling permits. That's why the hotel is, as you see it and look at all this, kind of covered up, relatively ugly. I imagine it's because of some kind of business problem, etc. Or maybe also to avoid showing the women in swimsuits right behind who are at the pool. Take a look over here. Lebanon, it was practically like an imposition, more than a solution. Keep in mind, much of the construction and modernity in Lebanon is attributed to the mandate of this prime minister. He built things like the new airport, a lot of things. But the craziest thing of all is that despite his massive security detail, even though he had armored cars at like level 200,000 and never left his house without a bunch of bodyguards and security, he was blown up in a van in a car bomb right here in front of the St. George complex. What a coincidence, right? Hotel, St. George, villas, yacht club, restaurant, bar, and pools. In the end, nobody ever found out who the mastermind was either. After this attack, they found the people who had operated the car, the bombs, and so on, but the truth about who was behind it was never known. It is presumed that it was Syria, but the truth is that nobody knows. Especially because during his government, he was heavily influenced by Saudi Arabia, which was also investing a lot to reform Syria. And nowadays, there's a statue of Mr. Rafik Hariri right over there in front. Let's cross to see it. Imagine the level of corruption that existed in the Lebanese government that even after the attack on Rafik Hariri, they eliminated the inheritance tax on his estate for 24 hours to prevent his entire fortune, which he had at least doubled during his term, from being taxed and to ensure it was distributed entirely to his children. By the way, an interesting fact about Lebanon is that electricity is one of the worst services there. They only have 2 to 3 hours of continuous electricity, businesses, houses, and so on. So they've installed these huge electric generators on the streets from private companies, which businesses connect to, so to speak. And then they pay for the kilowatt used at a much higher price. So is it very common for traffic lights not to have power? That there's literally complete anarchy in the street when crossing? It's a whole ordeal. It's impossible for you to be in a shop. It's happened to me at least 5 times in these 2 days that the power goes out and then you hear the generator turn on. There are still many things to improve still. Look, this is the area. Look over there at those other buildings that look a bit abandoned in the background. But then we see this whole area over here, which is super luxurious, super modern, super new. I don't know if you can see back here the Holiday Inn I mentioned earlier, which had mortar holes, grenade holes, and so on. The clearest message I've gotten from the Lebanese people I've had the chance to talk to is that they want the world to know that before being Muslims, Christians, Druze, and so on, we are Lebanese. We want to make those who govern us understand that the people are Lebanese before any sect, any political inclination, any religion, whatever you want to call it, so that you can understand that what we want is peace. We want the war to end. We want it to be seen that way again. The Switzerland of the Middle East, the Paris of the Middle East, those were some of the nicknames this country had in the 1950s and 60s before the Civil War. Okay, Manuel, so that was the whole story, the war, the 21st century. The conflicts in Lebanon haven't ended. In fact, today, the day I'm recording this video, there are airstrikes happening in a part of the country. You can go there, which is the craziest part of all, because what's happening is so surreal that the attacks are actually announced. I mean, today we're gonna fire at this time or something like that, so people get ready, they don't go, or they go at certain times, but they still go on with their normal lives. That's why we can see so much luxury on the streets. That's why we can see spectacular buildings, restaurants full of people, luxury stores. Because life in these countries has decided to go on with or without wars. And that's why it's very possible to show you two sides of Lebanon in the same video. While in one place you see luxury, in another place there are protests, there are wars. But those aren't the only two sides, because I've already mentioned it to you countless times. And life in a country isn't a coin with two sides. It's a wide range of grays. Some people might be doing well, others so-so, others really badly, and they can. Luxury investments might be happening just as wars and disasters might be happening. So I'm gonna try to go. But the truth is, I don't know if I'll be able to make it, and if I don't, well, I'll tell you about it anyway. And the thing is, the clashes between Hezbollah and Israel haven't stopped. But the tension intensified when the Shiite militant group decided to support Hamas in its fight for the liberation of Palestine. Since then, southern Lebanon has become a proxy battleground. Every day, missiles cross the border, drones, artillery, targeted bombings. And while the major powers discuss in air-conditioned rooms, civilians in southern Lebanon and northern Israel live under constant fire. I have decided to go into the suburbs of Beirut, where Hezbollah has its strongholds. The traces of past war are still visible. Collapsed buildings, walls marked by explosions, balconies hanging from structures that no longer seem alive. I promise you, it's really chilling to walk through these streets. This was the exact place
where the leader of Hezbollah was killed, and I'm going to tell you how all of this happened.
But the real turning point came on September 27, 2024. That day, Hassan Nasrallah, the absolute leader of Hezbollah for more than 30 years, was killed in an Israeli airstrike on the Jared's Creek bunker. I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing it right, but it's the one I have right in front of me. In the very heart of Beirut, more than 80 tons of explosives were used in a surgical operation, the result of years of intelligence and infiltration. Nasrallah was not just a leader, he was a symbol, he was the face of resistance. In fact, walking through these streets, you see him on every corner, on billboards, on pamphlets. Literally, he's everywhere. And his death was an unprecedented blow to this organization. There have been recent clashes here between Israel and Hezbollah. Worst of all, just days later, on October 3rd, Hakem Zafidine, cousin and possible successor, also fell in another Israeli attack in Dania. With two of its main figures eliminated in less than a week, Hezbollah plunged into crisis. The leadership was left in the hands of Naim Kashem, but his authority is uncertain and his future even more so. And in this area of the suburbs of Beirut, the buildings remain in ruins. But now the cracks are also internal, because the war against Israel is no longer fought only at the borders, but deep within the soul of Hezbollah. After that intense tour through the suburbs of Beirut, we decided to go back to downtown and explore some of the culinary offerings. Literally, life changes drastically with just 15 minutes between one area and another. Here you can find any franchise you can imagine, whether it's American, British, or European, for example. I just had lunch at a restaurant called Swiss Butter, which means Swiss butter, and it was amazing. And honestly, the price is really good. Everything here seems much more relaxed. This is a Christian neighborhood where, of course, alcohol is allowed and people come to enjoy the nightlife here. Not only Christians, obviously, but also Muslims from other countries who maybe don't want to be or can't be so conservative about their religion. And well, they come to enjoy the opportunities that Lebanon offers them. And so, waiting for sunset in front of a cliff, I'm going to end this video and my visit to Lebanon, not without first promising that I will return because I have loved this country. I think more than all the others I've visited in the Middle East so far, it has such authenticity and a wonderful vibe. Maybe also because I have roots here. I already told you in the Syria videos, well, that my grandmother was from Syria and my grandfather was from Lebanon. Although actually he died when I was very young and I couldn't share much of this. I feel like my blood calls me, my roots call me, they call me, and honestly I feel like I still have a lot to explore in this country. Well, I gave you a summary of the history of Lebanon. But honestly, beyond this dark tourism I did today, there are a lot of natural beauty. I mean, just look at this spectacle. The boats, the jet skis, the little beach towns. No, it's incredible. If you ask me, is it safe to go to Lebanon? I'd say yes, you should come. There are many people who depend on tourism, who need income from abroad, and besides, the experience you will have here will be wonderful. These 2 days on an unplanned trip to this small Middle Eastern country only convinced me that I have to come back. Of course, with Niñita next time for at least a week, because I would also like to explore its mountains, stay and enjoy the Mediterranean Sea, among other activities, as well as eat. Delicious. Tell me, what did you think? And get ready, because with this one, the Middle East videos are over, but there's still a lot of travel left. I'll see you in a few days with a new video.